Hi, how you doing? Justin here, and in this video I want to explain to you why I think it's better for most people to start off on an electric guitar. Now you might have heard different. There's a lot of people with a lot of different opinions, but what I want to explain to you is the reasons why I think an electric guitar is better for most people and the cases where it isn't, where you would be better off starting off with a steel string acoustic guitar or a classical guitar. But I think for the majority of people, an electric guitar is a much better option. Now, the first reason that I think this is important is for overall playability. Okay, on an electric guitar, usually the action is a lot lower. Now, the action is the distance between the strings and the frets, how far you have to push the strings down to get the notes nice and clear. On electric guitar, particularly budget electric guitars, it's generally a lot easier to press the strings down than it is on a steel string acoustic guitar or a classical guitar. Particularly budget acoustic guitars, it can be really difficult. And one of the things that I hear from beginners all the time is, oh, my fingers hurt, when's the finger pain going to go away? Oh, it's so painful, I can't practice every day, and this kind of stuff. And on an electric guitar, because you have to press a lot lighter to get the notes nice and clean in your chords, you don't get anywhere near as much finger pain as you will on an acoustic guitar. Now, really high-end acoustic guitars, if you've got several £1,000s to spend on an acoustic guitar as a beginner, which I don't think is a particularly good idea, you might get one that plays really easily with a really great setup and all of that sort of stuff. But most acoustic instruments, beginner level instruments, especially the really cheap acoustic guitars, are nearly impossible to play. I did a review recently of a really cheap acoustic guitar and I couldn't even play the chords. You know, I was really struggling. I've been playing guitar for more than 30 years and I couldn't do it. So I wouldn't expect a beginner who's taking their first steps on trying to play guitar to be able to play chords like that. And it's so easy for that to lead to frustration, you know, and then giving up or not playing as much. And then the fact that you're not playing as much means it takes longer, and then it's just like it ends up gathering dust in your living room, you know. So playability, I think, is really the key factor. Now, electric guitars are also a bit smaller. Usually you can get bigger ones, but they're usually a bit smaller, so they fit into your body nicer. There's less craning of the neck. If you've got an acoustic guitar, you have to look over the fingerboard, which you've got to try not to do, but most people are going to have to look at where their fingers are going. And on an acoustic guitar, it's that much further away. You know, they're usually a bit sharper. Most electric guitars have got a little bit of contouring here at the back, so they feel a little bit more comfortable. Acoustic guitars, sometimes you have to rest your arm up quite high, not that high probably, but you know, high enough for it to start to feel uncomfortable, whereas electric guitar, it sits a little flatter. You know, so the overall comfort level on an electric guitar is a lot better than for an acoustic guitar or for a classical guitar. A pretty common question when I say that people should start off on an electric guitar is about an amplifier. Do I need to buy an amplifier? Are they going to be too loud? And the answer is no, you don't need an amplifier if you're just starting out, okay? The electric guitar is plenty loud enough to be heard and to practice on and to play without an amplifier. You can hear it, it's not very loud. It's got a nice personal zone, so you can hear it plenty good if you're just playing it without it's not plugged into anything at all. Now, technology's come very far these days, and you can now plug into like iPads and all sorts of stuff to be able to get electric guitar sounds. You can plug directly into your computer. So you don't need an amplifier really at all. And if you go plug it into a computer, there's all sorts of possibilities for recording and different sounds and effects pedals and all of these sort of toys that can distract you for many hours that you don't really need but are loads of fun. And that's, you know, that's part of the electric guitar journey. Now, as well as being an advantage that you can hear it acoustically without plugging into an amplifier, it's also quiet enough that you could practice at night without disturbing your neighbors. So I could quite comfortably be playing this in an apartment, strumming. I can hear it fine. I know what I'm doing, but the neighbors downstairs wouldn't hear it at all, or they'd hardly hear it. You know, I think they probably wouldn't hear it at all. Okay, now that's an advantage. That's a way of being able to do your practice when you want without disturbing the family or friends or neighbors or anyone else. But you can still hear it enough, perfectly clearly enough, to be able to hear if you're doing stuff right or not. And if you want to plug into your phone or to your computer or whatever, then you can start playing around with effects and have proper electric sounds like distortion and all of that sort of thing. So that's already quite a few reasons why I think the electric guitar is better. But when should you consider getting an acoustic guitar or a classical guitar? So A classical guitar, I'll start off with, because it's pretty simple. If you want to play classical guitar, the style classical guitar, i.e. Bach or Villa-Lobos or whatever, that kind of thing, then you're probably going to want a nylon string classical guitar. Now, I just said there the key difference here, nylon strings. A lot of people think, oh, nylon strings, they're nice and soft, so they're easier for beginners. And that is a little true. The strings are softer on the tips of your fingers when you start out. So in that way, it's a little easier. Personally, I started out on a classical guitar. Okay, my first guitar was a Yamaha GT100, I think it was called, or GA100, something like that. And it was fine, but there are problems with it as well. So the strings are softer, great, but the neck is a lot wider. Okay, now it might only seem like, well, less than an inch for sure, but it feels a lot wider under your fingers when you're playing it. So when you're trying to get a C chord or a G chord, I remember really struggling to play a G chord on that guitar. And I remember when I first got my electric guitar, it was like, wow, this is amazing. It's so easy to do that. You know, usually the action isn't so much of a problem on classical guitars, but it's often a lot higher than electric guitar. The one advantage within this, aside from the soft strings, with the wider neck, some people that have got very, very large hands find it a little easier to get the chord shapes under their fingers on a slightly wider neck. Okay, there are various neck widths within the electric guitar category as well. So again, you want to be going to the store and trying a few different guitars and feel what feels comfortable in your hand. But if you've got a very, very large hand, you might find a classical type guitar a little easier. But that's not the case for most people. Most of the time, I think, if you're going to get a classical guitar, you get one because you want to play classical music. That's really the answer. When it comes to steel string guitar has a particular sound, a particular quality about it that you don't get from an electric guitar. And if you really want to play like the folky thing and Neil Young acoustic styly stuff or whatever, you know, folky style acoustic music, then you're not going to be an acoustic guitar to start off with, because that's the thing. You know, that's where that sound comes from. You can't get that sound from an electric guitar. It just doesn't happen. They're also obviously better if you imagine yourself playing at parties or barbecues regularly, where you don't want to have to lug around an amplifier, and it's not the right thing. If you want to play at parties and barbecues, you want to get yourself an acoustic guitar. However, you don't want to buy a really cheap acoustic guitar, because you won't be able to play it and it'll just be horrible. So if you're going to get an acoustic guitar, you need to spend a little bit more money, probably twice what you'd spend on a cheap electric guitar. So one thing that can make a really big difference on acoustic guitars is having a setup done. Now, a setup is usually done in a store or by a guitar luthier, where they adjust the height of the strings, where the strings are, the bowing of the neck, and a few other little things that they'll tweak to make the guitar easier to play. And it can make a huge difference, a really huge difference. So if your local store has a setup service, you might find that it's better to buy a cheaper guitar and have it set up than to buy a mid-price or an expensive guitar that's not set up. Often, the cheaper guitar with a good setup will be better, will sound better, play better, feel better, will be a better all-round instrument. So really, that's something that you want to explore. It works the same for electric guitar. Electric guitars can also be set up, and most of mine get set up, every couple of years or so. But in the beginner market, for electric guitars, they're usually fine kind of out of the box. You can usually make them better with a setup, but they'll be playable out of the box, whereas a cheaper acoustic guitars, they don't work. The cheap acoustic guitars, there's too many things. If that action's too high, it's too easy to get disheartened and give up. So my really strong opinion is that if you're just starting out on guitar, you're not really sure what you want to do, get an electric guitar, because it'll serve you well to start off with. If you really want to play classical guitar, buy a classical guitar. If you really love the sound of acoustic guitar, you love acoustic music, and you think you're might be playing at parties or barbecues or whatever, then an acoustic guitar is probably the way to go. However, you want to not buy the cheapest acoustic guitar that you can find. Buy one slightly above that and spend some extra money on getting a setup. It's one of those things, again, where shopping online is not as good as shopping in a local store. So just so you know, this is not I'm going to do a whole video about what to look for when you go buying a guitar. But guitars are really personal. You really want to like it. You want to feel good about the guitar. So you want to like the look of it, wants to feel nice in your body. Don't buy one because you think it's the right one to get. Okay, go yourself to a music store, pick them up, play them. So you're going to find some feel better in your hands than other ones, and that's really something that's important. And again, you're much more likely to find a nice setup on a guitar if you go to a music store. They've usually got a house guy that can do a good setup. Either that, or you just have a look on the internet for a local luthier near you and see if you can get a setup done that way. Maybe call them first, find out how much it is, so you've got that in mind when you go to the store to pick up a guitar you like. Definitely thinner strings will make a difference on acoustic guitar. Makes a difference on electric guitar, but again, not as necessary on acoustic guitar. You probably want thinner strings on there as well. For a lot of people, buying their first guitar is a very big decision, but one thing that you ought to bear in mind as well is that your first guitar is not likely to be your last guitar. Okay, so if you get into playing guitar, you're probably not going to stick with the same one after a year or two. So you can often think of the first guitar as like, that's what you're going to cut your teeth on. That's where you're going to get over your finger pain and learn a bit about what it is that you like. Because it won't be your first guitar, and if you think of it that way, buy the best guitar for being a beginner on. And then after that, in a year's time, you're going to know a lot more about what music you like, what sound you like, what things you couldn't do. You will have played some of your friend's guitar. You'll have a more informed opinion when you go to the music store, because you will have been playing a bit. You've got some songs under your fingers, so you can go and play a few more different guitars in the store and see what it is that you feel the most comfortable with. So I think that's a really important thing to remember as well. You're not buying a guitar that you're going to be stuck with forever, okay? You're buying a guitar, first of all, to learn on. Okay, and to learn on, you want something that's nice and easy, that's not going to force you to give up because it's too painful on your fingers. Right? It's really, really important, this stuff, I think, and this is why I'd recommend that you start off with an electric guitar. Hopefully this will help you on your debate, and if you want any more information, all of this stuff I've talked about in this video and a bunch more is over on the website, so go and check it out. It's in the first part of the beginner's course. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and I'll see you for plenty more very soon. You take care of yourselves. Bye bye.